Now, as I pointed out, we have two cases where we might generate an error. One is where we have a duplicate name, and the other case where we might have an error is up here if the name is blank. I've left the cases where we failed to execute the query to just abort the program with a die statement, because that's serious enough that I'm not going to ask the user to retry. The errors that I'm trapping here, and this is a defensible structure, the errors that I'm tracking are ones that I want the users to be aware of, and the user has a chance of correcting them. So I have two redirects here to a file called error.php, and I'm passing in a code 2 up here and code 1 down here. It's a very simple way of handling errors. And here is the error.php file, which will grow over time. And it has the standard includes up here. And then I'm doing an unloading of the parameter that was passed in, the code parameter, and setting it to a variable here called code. And I'm printing out a message saying sorry. And then if the code is 1, that pick has already been added. That's the duplicate name code. Code number 2 says you must enter a name for the new pick. So that's the error message that you get in the case where someone has not entered a name. Very simple, but we now have an error.php file to which we can redirect, and it handles two codes, and as the application will be built and extended, there will be more codes that are handled by this utility file. So this is the way in which we can trap errors from the addpick.php file. The other point that I wanted to show you was the SQL that is being built to insert a new record into the database. It's a standard SQL, and what it does is it says insert into the table, set the database column name equals this variable name, database column name equals that variable name. These are the variables that I unloaded, and that's just goes on and on and on and on to the end of the list of columns, and we just add a semicolon at the end of the SQL statement. And that's a standard insert SQL statement to update the database. Now, I've executed that code. I didn't get an error message, but before I move on, I'd better check and see if the data was in fact updated properly. So I'll go back into my SQL query browser, use the database, and I will then come back here and select where the name equals test, which was the name of the record that I just added. I execute the query, and here you can see this is why I entered that dummy data. The names of the columns are exactly the same as the data values that I entered, except in the case where I selected a province in this case. And here you can see HTML entities has stripped the ampersand and given us the code for the ampersand, which when we decode it inside the application will come back to an ampersand. And so here I have the various items that are in the database. I can see that I've added that record, so the update has worked. Now there's one other thing that we have to think about, and that is what happens after we've updated the database. We've added a record to the database. We don't go to the error page. And in this case, what we want to do is to merge two functions together. One is to update the database to add a pick, an item to the database that other people can view and they can add to their list of picks and preferences. But what we've decided is that if you add an item to the database, you automatically add it to your own list of picks, because there isn't much reason, so we think, to add an item to the database if you're not interested in it. So what we're going to do is to redirect to the page that adds or removes a pick from a user's own set of picks. And that's where the redirect will go. And now we'll take a look at that page.